Well, just to get started off, there are a number of questions already, and I have some as well about our panelists' impressions of what the United States can do to encourage China to move toward more green policies at a time when, as Linda just pointed out, the United States is under serious criticism for some of its own policies. In other words, does the U.S. need to resolve its own environmental problems before it can bring China on board? Linda, could you address that a little bit more, maybe specifically with the global warming leadership in mind? We heard recently from China that they are reluctant to accept the conclusions of the United Nations panel on global warming. They're still determined not to accept mandatory greenhouse gas emissions caps. And is there an interplay between the U.S. and China that somehow needs to be addressed from the U.S. side before we can see progress on that side?
I am a believer that the U.S. must lead, not follow. I think that if we had, and I don't think it's going to be easy, I should say that. I think if we had a greenhouse gas policy in the U.S. and we were in the process of understanding what it was going to take to make it work, it would give us the opportunity to provide more leadership to other countries. I think a regulatory framework will help drive new technology to the market, and I think that technology will be good in the U.S. as well as in other parts of the world. But I think it's a bit much for the U.S. to ask the developing economies to go first. I think we need to lead the way there.
There are a variety of specific questions about the sorts of things that would be the most cost-effective and deliver the biggest bang for the buck in terms of green results in China. Ling mentioned a few of the things that Wal-Mart has done. Are there 2 or 3 specific suggestions that you would have for, say, Chinese companies or multinationals working in China that could deliver in a short time a relatively high return for investment that would, in terms of an environmental result? What are 2 or 3 things that major companies, Chinese companies, or multinationals working there could do in the short term to have some kind of an impact on the environmental problem?
I think the one I mentioned earlier, like alternative source of energy, in terms of the LED lighting, in terms of the CFLs, the compact fluorescent light, are good examples. And we, at Wal-Mart, it's interesting, when we set out on this journey, one of the things that Lee Scott committed our company to do is that we will very broadly share learnings from across the world. And so we have, for instance, 3 stores, 2 Wal-Mart stores, one in McKinney, Texas, one in Aurora, Colorado, and one in Sam's Club in Georgia. And you would be amazed that what we have done is actually invited competitors and anybody who's interested to come in and look at the way what we have done in terms of energy conservation, in terms of waste, what we do with waste and recycling. So.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just quick. I think on efficiency, what you're talking about is really very simple technologies. We're talking about efficient, light bulbs, air conditioners, windows, motors, and they get integrated, in building design. So certainly, when you're looking at all the buildings that are going up and how to just bring the technologies and design integration that was available 15, 20 years ago. And so it's off-the-shelf available technologies that aren't being deployed because there are market failures, even here, and certainly everywhere, because of people who build and people who pay the bills and the role of the utilities. So I think there are a lot of barriers to getting the basic technologies that can improve the efficient use of energy in our building sector. So that's kind of the simplest thing. Similarly in transportation, and why aren't we investing in transit, and why can't we improve the efficiency of our vehicle fleets? Again, the technologies have been there here, and we haven't deployed them for 20 years for a lot of political reasons and others. So I don't think it's a technology issue. It's a looking at the marketplace and asking why the markets aren't working properly in this area, and what is the role of policy to help those markets work better, where consumers even win by using these technologies. And again, there are a lot of new ideas in terms of new technologies, but I come back always to technologies that are available today, and power plants also, combined cycle technology versus the older. I mean, products have been out there for 20 years and they're not being deployed. And people say, why wouldn't they be? Isn't it obvious? But we don't invest in our infrastructure, whether it's the building infrastructure or the transportation infrastructure or the industrial processes. I mean, the industries, so the efficiency gains, it's really about bringing the currently available technology and deploying it in an accelerated fashion to get the economic and environmental benefits. So it's a long answer. There aren't, unfortunately, in efficiency, it's not one or two or three technologies. Mm-hmm. It's really a lot of different things that add up, and how you integrate them together is the key.
Mm-hmm. There are also several questions that refer to the interaction in some of the trading schemes that have been set up internationally to grapple with the global warming problem. Is international trading of carbon credits a good way to get China moving down the path toward a green future? Would it be logical? We have one question asking for the U.S. energy companies to pay a premium to subsidize retrofitting or environmentally friendly power plants in China. In other words, would it be more cost effective for them to grapple with China's environmental problem rather than doing so at home? Are there some operable solutions to basically literally subsidizing China's conversion to a more green model? Linda or Ashok or Wan Lin, any might want to jump in.
It's a complicated question. I mean, our view is, again, the U.S. needs to get its act together first. I mean, it's kind of hard to set up a trading and an offsets program where companies here can meet their requirements by doing something in China. Maybe that makes sense, and maybe we can work out the rules to do that. But that doesn't even start until you have a program here where companies are required to meet a certain requirement. And so, yes, we have to have the leadership here, and whether it makes sense to allow that kind of reduction, or whether U.S. companies should be investing here also to make those reductions happen. So we're not taking that off the table as a possibility, as a way to encourage investments in China and India and other countries, but it shouldn't be the first thing we look at. We should be looking at, regulating carbon here, make sure that we're making the investments and improvements here, and China should be able to take advantage of the low-cost opportunities for reducing carbon emissions in China. I mean, so I think we're not there yet. But there are a lot of, experiments going on a voluntary basis and trading and offsets, and that's a good thing, and we'll learn from them when we shape a global regime. But for now, I think we agree with Linda. I think the leadership here in the United States is critical, and then creating a regime in terms of how trading might or might not happen can follow.